So The Simpsons, eh? Yeah, we're getting another 4 seasons of that. We're not getting to the end anytime soon. Renewing just as they have for Family Guy, Bob's Burgers, and American Dad, neither Fox nor Disney are just willing to let any of these shows die. Even the youngest of the bunch, Bob's Burgers, is somehow coming up to 14 years old already, let alone all the other now 20+ year shows still rolling along. But most particularly The Simpsons, who, if anything, are producing more output now than ever before, with a bunch of corporate stench Disney Plus shorts every single year on top of the new season. I still remember just before the pandemic with the release of Onward, where they replaced the traditional Pixar short with a Simpsons one. That was weird. Some of them good, some of them not so much. Typically, the more in-jokey ones with ties to other Disney IP are the worst of the bunch. The classic Wreck-It Ralph 2 approach, you know? There's one where Lisa's literally singing about how great Disney Plus is, as if there's that ironic tint of other Simpsons songs, when there isn't. She's just saying how great it is without really any jokes. The Christmas special they just did with Derren Brown was actually alright, but I think the point is that they really aren't pulling the brakes on these guys anytime soon. There was a time when I thought that the death of the key voice actors would be enough to stop them. However, unfortunately, we've now had both Rick and Morty, as well as Wallace and Gromit, demonstrate that that's not actually really a problem for different reasons, so maybe not. In fact, The Simpsons have done that for a few characters, particularly for the black characters that were previously voiced by white actors, except for Apu, who just straight up is not a thing anymore. So I guess the precedent is already there, that they can just switch in new voice actors, but maybe the end's not even in sight after these next 4 seasons, which is just crazy to think about. We would be facing a reality where The Simpsons completes a 50-year run soon, of which most people have only seen the first 10. That's absolutely nuts, yet entirely possible. I mean, we're already up to 35 years at this point. I did a video last year, in fact, talking about how they could potentially end it if there is some sort of ethical, nice roundup to the story. You can forget about that now, though. They're not going to end it until there's truly no more ground to run into. I can't really speak to the quality of the show now. Apparently, the writing team's been a lot better in recent years, and I guess that's hardly a surprise. You've got the biggest animation sitcom of all time. You could hope that they could definitely buy some decent writers. However, from what I've seen, it's not just the aged vocal performances that just make this show feel out of date at this point. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely part of it. You know, everyone's already singled out Marge at this point, as that's the most obvious example, but I can hear it in the other characters too. Homer and Grandpa are almost the same voice at this point, purely down to actual Dan Castellaneta himself aging, you know? However, beyond that, you've got a show that froze its characters' ages, but not its time period, leaving absolutely no cohesion across seasons. It would be a tall order regardless after running a show for 36 years and counting. However, a rewatch of just random samples of the episodes would now be quite the experience. You could go from an episode with Homer having a flashback to 10 years earlier when he had air in the 80s, to an episode where Homer reminisced on his childhood in the 90s. It's not something that makes the show bad, but these kind of retcons do speak to just how long this show's actually been around. I'm not saying they should have kept the timeline in the 90s, as I get why you'd want to be able to still talk about contemporary issues in the world. It's kind of half, you know, it's very much playing with the genre of parody. However, there is another example of a 1989 property who has moved with the times a lot more seamlessly. I once again, in my British ways, refer back to Wallace and Gromit, who, by the way, Matt Groening and the Simpsons team are a big fan of, to the extent both a parody claymation and Nick Park himself have popped up in an episode. Though to be fair, literally everyone's been in an episode at this point. But anyway, whilst we haven't had 36 years of regular seasons of Wallace and Gromit or anything where they've burnt out all the good ideas, it's still a great example that we've continued to visit where they've both introduced more up-to-date technologies whilst not breaking the style of their intrinsic world. And I think The Simpsons could have done something similar. You know, you could have just updated the world over time without outright committing retcons to the character's backstory or whatever. I mean, maybe that's just me. I do think the bigger issue, though, is that all of these shows are just still going for the sake of it at this point. There's almost this sense that there would be some kind of it'd be a shame to end them kind of tones, when I think that's just not true. I mean, just look at Futurama, who just get brought back every now and again. Whilst its audience isn't as big, I'd contend that the reputation of that show's held to a higher regard than any of the Sausage Machine animation domination shows. It can be done. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already. We sometimes do Simpsons content, so poke me if you want me to do more of it. Anyway, back to the second half of the never-ending Simpsons show. And it's just the speed of this consistent output as well. Which I don't say lightly in an age where it feels like no one can commit to consistent annual seasons anymore. It's really impressive that The Simpsons still produces 22 episodes a year, plus specials for Disney+. In this age where productions are now so inconsistent and we have 2-year-long breaks. But I just don't feel like I can easily re-enter the series anymore, you know? There's just so much of it. I know there's no running story, but it's just a lot. And it feels like there's an obligation for them to continue just because they're so far in. 783 episodes to be precise. And in fairness, I can see them using the 1000th episode as a potential escape plan, but that means we're only 3/4 done. And the thing is, ending the show as well wouldn't even be the end of the franchise. Necessarily. A show The Simpsons is often compared to is the likes of Friends. They were, after all, the two biggest shows in the 90s, and now, after 30 years, Friends is actually starting to lose its cultural stronghold on the current 18 to 25 generation, you know, an audience that it's otherwise held onto for a good few generations now. But even with this in mind, it's undeniable that a singular decade of television has now had a ridiculous level of success across the subsequent 20 years after it finished. From merchandise to royalties to Netflix paying a ridiculous amount to just have it, it's continued to be a massive cash cow. Which is why the question's often raised over if The Simpsons even wrapped up around the same time, or at least after the movie in 2007, would it actually be more valuable as an IP than now? Would the value of those classic episodes be greater if they only represented just over 1/4 of the show's entire runtime? With some quick maths, the 90s episodes represents about 200 of those 783 episodes, or 871 episodes when these 4 new commission seasons finish their run. If they are going for 1,000, just for reference, they're actually going to need to do just under 10 more seasons to actually get there. So we got to keep going until 2034 to hit that mark, which is that really worth it? Would The Simpsons be more valuable if it had been just the first 200? I mean, I'm sure Disney doesn't care. The property makes an absolute shedload regardless, even if people aren't even watching the new stuff. But just the excessive amount of new Simpsons stuff coming out every year, I'd argue, just carries a rather exhausted image with it. Both in terms of the show itself and the idea of having to watch all that. Ultimately, it has to end one day, right? Whether it is a more major cast member passing away, reaching a certain milestone, or even using a second movie as a finale, this show surely can't go on forever. And I think there's a good marketable approach in having a big finale canon ending to, you know, tie it all up in a nice bow and monetize the hell out of it. On the cast member front, remember, they have to find people to cover like 10 characters if just one of them stepped down or passed away. So it's only going to be a more uncomfortable topic as things go further. I don't know. This isn't the first time I've said that it kind of needs to end at some point with some dignity, but I just don't think this new 4-season commission is a sign that they have any plans for dignity for the finale. They're not even thinking of a finale at all. But regardless, that's at least my 2 cents on the latest and greatest Disney news with the Simpsons series. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this little mini. Do tell me your thoughts. Do you think they can carry the Simpsons run on? Or is there going to be a point where practicalities do literally stop the show being workable? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And I shall see you all in a little bit. Bye-bye!